History isn't just written in blood, it's written in debt. Europe learned this lesson the hard way through one man, Napoleon Bonaparte, a soldier who became an emperor, a revolution that turned into an empire, and a continent that paid the bill. When we speak of Napoleon, we speak of genius, of strategy, of glory. But empires are not built on brilliance alone. They are built on money, borrowed money, stolen money, printed money. This is not the story of battles, it is the story of costs, the price of armies, the price of conquest, and the price Europe would keep paying long after Napoleon fell. This is the price of empire. By the late 18th century, Europe was already exhausted. Decades of dynastic wars, bloated monarchies, and fragile economies had left the continent standing on thin ice. France was the most dangerous example. In 1789, the French state was bankrupt, not metaphorically, literally. More than half of all government revenue went directly to servicing debt. Wars had drained the treasury. Luxury had drained legitimacy. And when the money ran out, so did obedience. The French Revolution did not begin with ideals. It began with unpaid bills. The monarchy collapsed, but the debt remained. France didn't inherit freedom alone. It inherited insolvency. Across Europe, other empires watched nervously. Britain funded wars through credit. Austria relied on outdated tax systems. Prussia squeezed a small population for military power. Every major state depended on war, and war depended on money. Then came Napoleon. He did not rise in a vacuum. Napoleon emerged from chaos, a nation desperate for order and willing to pay any price for stability. As first consul, he stabilized currency, reorganized taxation, centralized administration. For the first time in years, France could actually pay its soldiers. But stability came with ambition, and ambition demanded expansion. Napoleon did not merely inherit France's debt problem, he weaponized it. Borrowing became policy, conscription became currency, and conquered territory became income. Each victory fed the system, each defeat strained it further. France no longer fought to survive, it fought to sustain its empire. And as the borders expanded, so did the bill. Not just for France, but for every empire forced to respond. From London to Vienna, from Berlin to Moscow, Europe entered the most expensive chapter of its modern history. What followed was not just a series of wars. It was a continental economic collapse spread across 15 years. And Napoleon stood at its center, not as the cause of Europe's problems, but as the man who multiplied them. Napoleon's empire was not funded by prosperity. It was funded by war paying for the next war. Between 1799 and 1815, France fought almost continuously. Not months, not campaigns. 15 years of mobilization. The French state spent an estimated 1.6 to 2.1 billion francs on military operations alone, adjusted to modern value, up to $150 billion. And this figure excludes civil administration, occupation costs, and long-term pensions. Napoleon's solution was simple. If France could not afford war, Europe would. Conquered territories paid contributions. Occupied cities paid indemnities. Allied states paid subsidies. War became self-financing, until it didn't. But France was not the only one bleeding. Britain, the banker of war. Across the Channel, Britain chose a different strategy. Britain did not conquer Europe, it financed Europe. Between 1793 and 1815, Britain spent over £800 million fighting Napoleon. In today's value, nearly $500 billion. This was not spent on British armies alone. Britain paid Austria, paid Prussia, paid Russia. Coalitions were purchased, not inspired. To fund this, Britain expanded public debt to unprecedented levels. By 1815, British national debt exceeded 250% of GDP, an economic gamble that only worked because Britain won. Victory turned London into the world's financial capital. Defeat would have meant collapse. Central Europe, the repeat offenders. Austria fought Napoleon, lost, rebuilt, and fought again. Twice. Each defeat destroyed entire armies. Each rebuild required emergency taxation and loans. Austria's estimated cost, up to $90 billion in modern terms. The empire survived, but permanently weakened. Prussia's humiliation in 1806 nearly erased it from European power. To recover, Prussia militarized society, reformed taxation, expanded conscription. The price: billions spent to regain relevance. Napoleon did not destroy Prussia, he reshaped it. Spain, the collapse no one planned. Spain paid the most invisible cost. Napoleon's invasion shattered Spain's economy from within. Agriculture collapsed, trade routes vanished, colonial control weakened. Between 1808 and 1814, the Peninsular War devastated Spain's economy. Modern estimates place Spain's direct wartime costs at the equivalent of $50 to $70 billion in today's value. By 1803, Napoleon faced a problem no victory could solve. France had regained Louisiana from Spain, a vast territory stretching across North America. On maps, it looked like an empire. In reality, it was a liability. France could not defend it, could not populate it, and could not afford to lose it to Britain. Maintaining Louisiana meant fleets, garrisons, supply lines, expenses France no longer had the luxury to carry. So Napoleon made a decision that revealed the true nature of his empire. He sold it. For $15 million, France transferred one of the largest territories on Earth to the United States. The money was not invested in development. It was absorbed by war, soldiers, weapons, debt service. Louisiana was not sold because Napoleon lacked ambition. It was sold because Europe was more expensive. An empire in America could wait. The war in Europe could not. The Louisiana Purchase was not a diplomatic triumph. It was a financial retreat, a reminder that even at his height, Napoleon was liquidating assets to keep the war machine alive. By 1812, Napoleon had reached the limit of Europe. Only one power remained unconquered: Russia. The invasion of Russia was not only a military gamble, it was an economic suicide mission. Over 600,000 soldiers marched east. They were fed by supply lines that did not exist, paid by money that France no longer had. Russia burned its own cities, destroyed its own harvests. Scorched earth was cheaper than defeat. By the time Napoleon reached Moscow, there was nothing to conquer, and no economy left to exploit. The retreat destroyed the Grande Armée. Fewer than 30,000 returned combat-ready. The cost in today's value, over $170 billion for Russia alone. For France, incalculable. The war machine had finally consumed itself. Waterloo was not the end. When Napoleon fell in 1815, Europe did not celebrate peace. It counted losses. France paid reparations, lost territory, lost influence. Its population took generations to recover. Britain emerged dominant, not militarily, but financially. Prussia and Austria reorganized. Russia became Europe's new kingmaker. Napoleon was gone, but the system he accelerated remained. When the wars finally ended, Europe did not return to normal. Across the continent, governments opened ledgers and found them empty. The final estimate is staggering. When adjusted to modern value, The Napoleonic Wars cost Europe between $2.5 and $3 trillion. By the time the Napoleonic Wars ended in 1815, the balance sheet was no longer financial. Modern historical estimates agree on one fact: between 3.5 to 6 million people worldwide died as a direct or indirect result of the wars. To survive the wars, states learned new habits: permanent taxation, mass conscription, centralized bureaucracy. War demanded systems, and those systems never left. Napoleon did not invent the modern state, but he forced Europe to accept it. Efficiency replaced tradition. Accounting replaced honor. Debt replaced loyalty. Governments became machines designed to extract resources, not temporarily, permanently. Napoleon is remembered as a genius, a lawgiver, a reformer, a modernizer, and some of that is true. But history often forgets who paid for progress. Empires leave monuments. Debt leaves invoices. Napoleon lost his crown, but the system he accelerated survived him. Modern taxation, permanent militarization, economic warfare. The tools of empire became normal. The wars ended in 1815. The payments did not.